Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Talking About Rock, sponsored by School of Rock, Rochester, New York. Thank you for joining us. As always, you can catch all our interviews wherever you get your podcasts and on our YouTube channel. Also, you can check out our new website for photos and links to our interviews at talkingaboutrock.com. On today's show, a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, and producer, he is most noted for being the bass player and backup singer in Slash featuring Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators, and for being the frontman of the Age of Electric. In more recent years, he's been making his mark as a singer-songwriter with solo performances, as well as fronting former Kiss guitarist Bruce Kulick's band and his own Canadian supergroup, Toque. Today, he's here to talk with us about his latest project, Heroes and Monsters. Next, we speak with Todd Kerns on Talking About Rock. All right, let's welcome Todd Kerns to the show. Hello, Todd. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, I'm loving this new project you have with Stef Burns and Will Hunt. Tell us how this started, man.
Well, thank you so much. I was sitting in this very room and I got a phone call from Will Hunt just asking about, we're talking about like somewhere in the middle of lockdown, the initial conversation started to happen, and I'm like on the couch deep into Tiger King or whatever the hell it is. whatever
right
whatever lockdown stuff was going on,
right.
And he just sort of hey, my friend and I are knocking some stuff around, what do you think? And I'm like, send it over, and turned into a song and turned into another song, and then it turned into an album. So it's a very interesting thing for me, because if it wasn't for COVID, there's no way any of the guys involved in this would have had time to do this. So so we just kind of basically just took advantage of that situation and made a record. I mean, with no real plan as to, well, what are you going to do? Is there going to be another one? All those conversations are like, I don't know.
We don't know.
It's shocking we got the first one out.
Right. We got to kind of see how it goes. And I hear that from a lot of artists, because we all had time on our hands. So we looked for ways to fill that time. I did that by starting this podcast. But a lot of folks had, albums either in the works and they're waiting to release it, or they're like, okay, what projects can we work on now while we have this time? Exactly like you said,
Well, especially considering, I don't know about you, but for me, it was kind of like, my whole life is playing music. It's hustling from, one gig to another gig, and having a plan in place of having a few different things up, lots of balls in the air and kind of lots of irons in the fire. And then sort of, when you take away the live playing aspect, it sort of creates an interesting conversation of, well, I guess we can still record and make music, or still record and write music. You know what I mean? It was just sort of the idea of like, even people were, a lot of people were very sort of doomsaying about like, this is the end, that we won't be touring anymore.
Yeah. That
kind of thing, and that, although I never really bought into it, I sort of, well, what am I going to do? It's like, if it's going to take till, the fact that by the time we were into 2022, that stuff was kind of basically returning to normal.
Right.
And it returned to normal a lot quicker than anybody really sort of foresaw it happening. And then it just sort of, as something will happen, the dominoes just fall, and then it's just boom, it's normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now in 2023, it's sort of like, by the time a record like this is finally coming out, you're like, because records get made, they get finished, there's an entire
remastered and stuff. Yeah.
All the process of getting artwork together, then looking for your window of opportunity to actually release the thing.
Right.
It's by the time it comes out, you're like, well, I never foresaw by 2023 all the things that we would all be individually involved in, but here we are. It's sort of it's like, hey, can we go and do a couple of shows here and there, and it turns into 10, and away you go.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of why I started doing this as well, just to kind of let people know that there's a lot of venues out there that need support. There's bands out there that need your support. Check them 100%. Out. They're putting out new material. You know, obviously during the whole lockdown thing, none of the venues were making any money, and obviously none of the bands, right? So that was
Yeah,
the whole deal. So it's great to see all this stuff coming back. Like you said, tours are happening. I mean, tours are booked for like, you know, a couple years beyond now. And
way in
it's kind of
advance.
hard
Yeah,
to
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
hard to get a gig from a lot of things I hear about, you know, and you've been so busy doing stuff, you know, starting with Slash and Myles Kennedy, fronting Age of Electric, you know, your band Toque. You've
Yeah.
been just keeping busy, man. You've been rolling from one thing to another.
That's good pronunciation of Toque, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm close to Canada, so
There you go.
we're fairly close
Exactly.
to Canada, so I know it's Toque.
I know everybody says Toque. Well,
Right.
everybody in America usually. Yeah.
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 Yeah, if you don't have Canadian friends, you probably pronounce it that way. Or if you don't, if you haven't heard the Geddy Lee song "Take Off" that he did back in the day, stuff like that.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
you had so much stuff going on. Crazy busy. But I mean, the tracks are just like no holds barred, straight ahead, rock and roll. And when I heard the first track, Locked and Loaded, I was all in. I mean, that was like the beginning of it right there. You got to come out of the gate strong, and you guys did, you know.
That's actually the first song we ever wrote together, which is really interesting that it leads the record. I kind of had forgotten. It's weird to say I'd forgotten, but I kind of forgot that we had all agreed that the album should open with that. And then when I kind of went back to listen to the masters, like, oh yeah, we did choose to open with this song. I thought because Raw Power was also discussed, you know, come out swinging. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that Locked and Loaded was sort of, I think the fact that we had sort of like literally, like I said, like, you know, passing files back and forth. Keep in mind we're doing this remotely, so we're not in the same room. Like,
Right, right. And you have a home studio? I assume a lot of folks
yeah,
have that.
everybody has stuff going on. So I was just doing stuff here in Vegas, and you know, Stef is in Milan, Italy,
Right.
and Will is in, you know, Florida. So it's kind of a matter of these you know, just kind of working like that. And the first thing we came up with was Locked and Loaded, and it sort of felt like, yeah, we should lead with that because it's aggressive and it's sort of is a an attention seeking kind of song for sure.
Yeah, it definitely gets your attention and tells you, you know, these guys are here to rock. Check it out. Very, very cool. And you talked a little bit about the songwriting process, you know, changing files and things like that. But was it mostly you're just putting down tracks and you guys are writing around the tracks, or was it always different? Did you have like a formula you were using at all, or was it just a little bit of everything?
There wasn't really a formula. I think it was just sort of like, you know, just stuff would come from here and there, and we would kind of like throw our stamp on it and do our thing. And then, you know, because keep in mind, we're like arranging as we're going along too. So
Right.
a demo is one thing, and then it kind of gets readdressed, and then Will kind of does his thing. So it's always like start with the drums, even though the drums are sort of built on a sort of track of a skeletal work as well. And then I do my thing, Steph's doing his thing, and put the vocals on it and all that kind of stuff. So it's in reality, people keep thinking it's so strange, but people don't really realize that a lot of records are done fairly separately anyway. Even if a
Right.
band is recording in one studio, it's sort of like often the band is together getting the drum tracks down,
Right. Right.
and then everybody kind of goes off. The drummer,
Yeah, they don't realize
they,
like the bass player will come in, maybe he'll lay down some tracks, so the drummer will come in when he has time, he'll lay on his stuff, and then you guys will play it
yeah,
back and then mix it together.
yeah. Generally, you know, it's kind of like we're doing bass this week. Okay, so the bass player is there with
Right,
the producer. The drums have already been recorded and
right.
edited, or what they're going to do to it, and then the bass gets finished. Then the bass is done, and the guitar player comes in, or maybe two guitar players, whatever you have, you know.
Right, right,
And you know, so it's kind of like, you know, I'm not usually just kind of hanging around while Slash is playing guitar or something like that. It's like
right.
I'm certainly welcome to, and I have, but at the same time, it's like, you know, these guys are focusing on the work, and even with a guy like Slash, it can eventually get kind of like, do I need to be here?
Right.
You know, it's like if I'm not playing and I'm not working,
You don't need
maybe
to
I
be
should
in the studio for 6 or 8 hours a day if you're not
exactly
really need
maybe
to
I
be
should
there.
take advantage of some sunshine and, you know,
Right.
get out of the dungeon for a while. But that's largely how records are made. I mean, the last Slash record we made collectively as a band. We just sort of recorded as live as possible. So, but that is sort of an exception to a much larger rule these days, you know.
Yeah,
So these
right.
days, it's
Usually.
not really done like that at all.
Yeah, yeah. Usually someone's kind of leading the project and they may even have bits and pieces of it kind of ready for you, and they just want you to maybe put a little spin in it or see what your take is on it type of thing. But that had to be
Absolutely.
pretty amazing playing with Slash and having that whole thing going
Yeah.
on. That'd be an amazing opportunity, right?
Well, it's been going on for 13 years. I mean, it's still continuing in whatever fashion we can kind of make it happen. Pre-GNR reunion, it was sort of a totally different thing. I mean, Myles was always the lead singer of Alter Bridge, so there was always
Right.
the kind of
And
juggling of
they're got a
schedules.
tour coming out. I just saw,
And
right?
they've been touring and have a record out. They toured Europe and now they're going to America.
Right.
So it's yeah, it's one of those things where our schedules are just, crazy. Everybody's doing other things, but I I kind of that's kind of how I think I roll best in a lot of ways. I think I do actually really enjoy kind of the I don't know what the word is. It's interesting to me to imagine having been like 23 years old and putting Aerosmith together and then being 73 years old and still being an Aerosmith.
Right, right.
It's a
Yeah,
very interesting idea.
a lot of guys have multiple projects going on. Like you
Yeah,
said, keeping themselves busy is better. It's always good to be busy. Definitely.
I think so. I think, and honestly, in a day and age where, well, Aerosmith is a good example, and Kiss, and a few bands that a lot of my heroes don't put out new music anymore. So to me, I kind of feel like, well, I feel like I want to make music. I feel like I want to create music and put music out there. And I've been lucky enough to be sort of in a over the past however many years, just constantly sort of pushing new music out.
Yeah.
And I think that that's sort of the kind of thing at the end of the day when you're 75 years old and you look back, you want to go, well, I did this, I did that, Heroes and Monsters, that was an awesome thing,
Right.
maybe the third Heroes and Monsters was even better than the first. Who knows? We don't know yet. We'll have to project into the future.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. As fans, we want to see new music every once in a while. A lot of the artists, they think one way or another about it. I mean, Carmen Apiece just said today online that streaming has ruined songwriting. He doesn't want to write songs, and I get that for a lot of the bands, like you mentioned, right? Aerosmith and Kiss, they don't want to waste the time going in the studio, put new material because they don't feel the product's not going to sell, right?
But it's also,
but there's another side to it too, right?
Yeah, from Carmine's point of view, sure, I agree with that. But there's also a whole other world, and the world that really matters now, honestly, is the younger people, and they
exactly.
It always has been that way. When I was young, we, what we were doing and what was the music that was coming up when I was, when we were young, you and I.
Right.
It's sort of, those people sort of create the future, and I think that
exactly
this model that we live in now, where music can be released into the world instantaneously,
right,
has its good and bad points, obviously, and I think that's that's kind of, it's kind of almost not worth discussing anymore because it just kind of is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because I think what happened, in my opinion anyway, all the record companies missed the boat back in the day. They should have jumped on the streaming services. If you would have had like Warner Brothers Records says, $20 a month, I can stream your artists, whatever. Sure, I would have paid that for the record company. Sure, I would have did that. Can you imagine? Right?
Yeah.
But they all said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to go on, Apple iTunes or whatever. We're not going to put songs on there. And they missed the boat. And I think that's what happened. But we are seeing new stuff come out and people are starting to buy stuff again.
Nobody could have foresaw this being the way it is. Even into the 2000s, I don't think anybody really could have foreseen the streaming service in the television and film industry or any of it having quite been this revolutionary. I mean, I don't work in the film industry, but I can imagine that there is a conversation about, product that is getting made on HBO or Netflix or whatever, would not have been able to have existed in the old way. So I believe that in music, even though there is a risk constantly of being lost in the mix of just so much music being released, that's unfortunately just part of the byproduct of a medium now that is just so instantaneous that it just is. And I think that there is as much as in the film industry, as I just mentioned, I believe that is the case with music as well, that there are going to be things that will find an audience that never would have had that chance in the old model. and vice versa. You know what I mean? It's just sort of, anybody who lived in a world where, like when I was a kid, you put a band together, you built an audience, you recorded your music.
Right.
Hopefully you got signed, and
Right. That was the
hopefully,
big thing to get signed.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
get signed and get a record out.
Right.
And then it's sort of up to the eye of the beholder. I mean, getting signed was never the end, because you can get signed and have like you put out a record and it doesn't do anything, and it's
Right.
over. You know what I
And
mean?
there's no
That,
support. Right.
in reality, that's kind of probably more the rule rather than the exception. So I think that, in this day and age, it's a very interesting time. Not only is it an interesting time to release records, it's an interesting time where the discussions are about, should we be releasing singles? Not even releasing records.
Right.
Like,
Because I
looking
looked at that model, right? We're kind of
Mhm.
almost back to how it started in a sense, but it's digital now, right? So in the
Yeah, it's
50s
like,
and 60s, that's what they would do. They would release
yeah,
a single or two, see how that panned out, and then they would come out with the album. And we've almost kind of gone back to that.
it's sort
Digital.
of, has kind of got back to that, where the idea of like looking at you right now, where I'm looking at our Heroes and Monsters album cover, the idea of collecting 10, 12, 14 songs and putting it in a package and putting an artwork on it. Is that an antiquated idea at this point? I don't know. I mean, like, the whole idea of like, kids don't care about that. I still do when I have my vinyl, and I like looking at the artwork and reading, oh, Bob Clearmountain mastered this. But I know that I may have been an exception to a much larger rule of people who just enjoy music. And I think that's true. I think you realize, as a person who's really into music, that not everybody is as into it as you are. It's kind of like being,
Right.
I don't know, really into Star Wars or something, so really into the Green Bay Packers or whatever it is. It's kind of like whatever you're really into. You have people that share that passion, and the rest of the world just goes, dude, I just enjoy watching the game. I don't really care
Right,
about
right.
like
But you bring up an
all that
interesting
stuff.
point about the artwork, and that was always been a
Mhm.
major thing for albums to come up with a cool album cover. And I'm glad that we're still doing that. And your album cover is fantastic. And
Oh,
I think
thank you.
that gives you're welcome. And I think that gives the exposure to people that aren't familiar with it. Because I always remember when you're going to record stores back in the day, like you're saying, there's tons of bands out, right? You see a cool album cover, it's like, well, this is cool. I want to check this out, right? It kept your attention. So I think
Yeah,
there's still value in that.
I can't tell you how many Molly Hatchet records were sold by those album
Right,
covers.
right.
Yeah.
Because it was
It's like,
just
wow,
so cool.
It's a cool
Right?
record cover. I got to buy this. Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
that feels like it's a bit of a lost art, that whole thing of like actually buying a record because this looks cool. I have no idea what this sounds like, but it looks cool.
Right,
Um,
right.
um, but at the same time, I don't really lose a lot of sleep thinking like, is this the way it's going to be for us? Discussions with like Slash and a lot of my old school friends, it's like, this is what we've always done. We're just going to keep doing it until it's 100% no, you don't do that. It's kind of it's like,
right.
yeah, and same with the idea of releasing hard copies, compact discs, and everything else. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to do it until it's basically not a thing
Right.
anymore.
And some folks
Yeah,
are actually going back to releasing cassettes for their new releases as well now.
they are. We
You know?
released a cassette on. Hang on a second, I think I have it right here, for the last Slash album. It's it came out on cassette. It's really hilarious, which
People
I
are
would
starting to
never,
do that.
have guessed. Not only that, but Gibson Records made us our own SMKC boom boxes. If you see the
Oh, nice. Oh
SMKC.
yeah. I had a very large one back in the day. That was
Oh,
the
me
thing to
too, me
have. You had
too.
to have the boom box. Yeah.
Hell yeah, yeah. So it's an interesting time. I think that vinyl has had such a resurgence in and of itself. I don't know that it's like, when you really look at the numbers, if it's like, if you only released vinyl, that you could have that be your career. But it is fun. It's really exciting that actually exists. But honestly, it's just always going to be, I mean, probably you and I, when we get in our car to drive wherever we're going to go, I don't know what you drive, but I don't even have a CD player in my car anymore. So it's all, whatever's on my phone or whatever I'm getting by
Right,
streaming
right.
services and whatnot. So, and that's just the nature of the way the business is, or the way that technology is. You know what I mean? Like
It's the technology that the next generation, and we've had to embrace obviously as well, definitely.
100%.
But I am seeing some resurgence in record stores and new stores opening. I visit
Yeah.
quite a few around here just to see what the business is like, just to see what they're selling, see what's coming out, things like that, and talk with the owners and stuff. And they're doing okay. You know, they got the high grade vinyl now, so it's a lot more expensive, but
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a different world. And I think that there's quite a few places in in the UK and in Europe, you'll find HMV still exists as a chain, which is really exciting. Whenever I'm over there, or like go to Tokyo, you get to go to Tower Records.
Yeah, I heard Tower Records is coming back.
A multi-layer Tower Records in Tokyo is very exciting. You know what I mean? And that's for a guy like me. You know, in Canada, there's a chain of record stores called Sunrise that now when I walk into a mall, because I think about malls, I'll be in a mall one day, you know, my wife's got to go do whatever, and I'll be in a mall and I go, okay, well, what can I go do? Because I would immediately think when I was a kid, what was the first thing I would do when I go into the mall? I'd go to the record shop.
The record store. Yep.
Yeah, but it doesn't exist anymore. So I'd be like, oh, okay, well, that changes the entire mall experience for 30 plus years now, I guess.
Yeah.
But it just sort of, to see that there's this sort of community of people. Here we have Zia Records, and in Arizona as well. That when I go there, it's such a cool hang to go down there and just see everybody like, perusing and just checking it out. And it's always a lot of people in there, and I love that. I love that about that community of people who just have a passion for music.
Yeah, I think there's still a market for it, and I think we're going to see more of a resurgence with it coming forward. So let's get back and talk a little bit more about the tracks. We want to talk a little bit about the latest video you got coming out, and we're going to check it out in a moment for "Break Me, I'm Yours." Very cool track. Tell us a little bit about that.
That one was a fun one. It was kind of like when I was speaking earlier about like being in the 21st century and not being too afraid of, just leaning into sort of certain influences that might be, you know what I mean? Like in the 90s, it became very sort of, it was verboten to talk about, the 80s in a way, you know what I mean? But now in this day and age, I feel like we all have come so full circle that we can kind of do whatever the hell we want. So it has a very AC/DC kind of thing to it. And I kind of felt like, yeah, let's just lean into that. Because, I mean, you can carve out the sound of a record by including or excluding one or two songs. You know what I mean? Like you can have a much moodier record if you decide to include nothing but the moodier songs, or have a much more fun record by having, excluding a few of the moodier songs and including some fun songs. And, I just felt like "Break Me, I'm Yours" was a really fun thing, and much to the chagrin of a lot of us involved, it's just sort of like we just thought it'd be cool to include a good fun song, but it's sort of, in a lot of ways, a lot of people have gravitated towards that song as being like, that's a great song. I'm like, well, thank you. There's a lot of other things on there, so check it out.
Right, there's a good traction.
But I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's a fun one.
All right, yeah, so let's take a quick break here, and we'll play the track for "Break Me, I'm Yours," and we'll be right back here on Talking About Rock with Todd Kerns. Okay, we're back here on Talking About Rock. Just checked out the new video there. Break Me, I'm Yours. Awesome track. Really digging that, man. You got a little bit of everything going on this new album. Very, very cool. You know, and like we were talking about, the artwork really gets you going. You know, I think it's a great track. Great stuff.
I think we kind of leaned into trying a little bit of diversity in the recording. You know, I mean, just sort of making sure that the record itself wasn't just the same song 10 times. It's kind of like has somewhere to go. So for me, it's when it's Break Me, I'm Yours to say Blame or Angels Never Sleep or Don't Tell Me I'm Wrong. It's sort of like these are very different versions of the same band. I think that's important. I mean, with Led Zeppelin or a band like that, you could, you know, when I say Led Zeppelin to one person, I might conjure Black Dog, to another person it conjures Battle of Evermore. You know, there's
Right.
some very different sounding versions of what Led Zeppelin is. Um, and a lot of other bands too, for that matter. You know, I mean, so, but just using that as an example, I kind of find that we find a lot of for what the Heroes and Monsters guys we just wanted to try and do something that was a little bit, you know, not to feel too pegged into we have to do this, you know what I mean, and just have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that's the right choice for the first album from a project. You know, have a little bit of everything and see what really goes over well, and kind of fit your mold a little bit more, and maybe what you want to go toward the next time. Maybe that's definitely the way to start it out for sure.
Totally. Yes.
So, and you're originally from Saskatchewan, Canada, and I was reading
Yeah.
you took a break a little bit from production rehearsals with Slash, and you did a quick cover band, Cover Boy, and you're doing some Kim Mitchell and April Wine. That
Well,
had to be pretty interesting,
that's so funny because Cover Boy was a jam band with Chris Jericho, the wrestler, who
right?
was also Canadian. And then we just kind of started doing Toque, which sort of grew out of Cover Boy, which is essentially just our loving homage to Canadian rock. You know what I mean? And all the music we grew up on.
Yep.
Like you said, Kim Mitchell, April Wine, Loverboy. It goes a lot deeper than that to stuff that most Americans or anybody may not know. So, but that was part of the fun of it, was us listening to these songs and going, how great is this song? Wouldn't it be cool to like have somebody in Brazil go, that's my favorite song? And that has happened now, where people in Japan or Australia are hearing stuff they never would have heard had we not recorded a version of it. So that was kind of the whole fun of it, you know. I mean, Toque has kind of grown into a you know, we do our own songs now and our own music now, and we have these very same discussions about how do we release this? Is it a record? Is it a single? You know, all that conversation. But that is part of the fun of doing this, is when you get musicians together for a cover project, it's very likely that some original music might pop out of it, because that's what we do.
Right. And you just jam it out and stuff. And it was so cool. You're covering some Kim Mitchell, and I saw that he's posted some dates, and he's going to be touring again, which I'm very happy about. Very glad to see him back on the road doing that.
He
So
never
that's super
stops.
cool.
He never stops. He's so talented. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was great to see that. And what I like to ask folks too, also different musicians, what's your typical gear setup that you like to use? Is there a typical go-to model, guitar, amp, effects, anything you like to typically use, or do you change it up a lot?
I do change it up, but I've been very fortunate to have a relationship with a company out of Vancouver, Canada called Prestige, that I do my signature model bass and six string through. We released the six string back in 2017 at NAMM. We got a platinum award through Guitar World magazine, which was really exciting for a nerd like me who grew up on just drooling over guitar magazines, you know. But yeah, so that's kind of largely what I do. I've always used GK amps for bass. I'm not religious about it, because I do think there are some great other models, but in the Slash band, that's always been what I've used. But I mean, in bass, it's the Tech 21 Sans amps have become a big part of my world. Currently in love with the Geddy Lee 2112, actually, his signature.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so damn good. A lot of us are using it now. In Guitar World, I'd use my guitar. There a lot of mostly Marshall type stuff. You know, there's a bit of digital fun. We've been digging into things like Kempers and whatnot in the Toque world, but largely just a Marshall and my guitar. You know, I'm kind of good to go. I'm very Malcolm Young that way when it comes to when I have to play guitar. I'm like, less is more, I feel like.
Excellent. Very, very cool. Yeah. folks always like to know what's going on or what kind of setup you guys are using and stuff. And if you're interested in, delving into different things. So
Totally.
as this project's moving ahead, do you guys see maybe any tour dates coming up or any opportunities to be playing?
Yeah, we're about to head to Italy for 10 shows. Stef lives in Italy, so it just kind of went from, an offer to 2 to 10, so we're going to go over there for 2 weeks and knock out 10 shows. It's going to be a blast. I mean, it's been really interesting for me going over this music, sort of like, okay, because a lot of the time you record a record, you don't really think about playing it live. You just you're just doing the work, Then you pick
see
up
what
the
happens,
bass.
see where it goes.
Exactly, yeah. Then I got to pick up the bass and go, can I sing and play this at the same time? There's a lot of having to kind of just get in the dojo and work it out, and that's sort of been part of the fun. But we are all very busy guys, so now we're just kind of like, we have this one little window to go out and do some work and then sort of see what comes down the line after that.
Very, very cool. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us today. If folks want to know more about you, where should they check you out? Should they check out your website or on social media, or where should they get a hold of you?
Everywhere, basically. Yeah, my website's just toddkerns.com. I'm Todd Kerns on Instagram and Facebook, and Todd Dammit Kerns on Twitter. I've been entertaining the idea of getting over to the other mediums that there are, but I find it sort of overwhelming enough in what we have.
I totally agree. Well, folks, check out the new Heroes and Monsters from Frontiers Music. And Todd, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to get to hang out.
Excellent. Yeah. If you folks out there have comments or questions, feel free to email us at talkingabout.rock@gmail.com. You can like us and follow us on all the social media services. And for this interview, it'll be on our YouTube channel and all the streaming services as well. Cool. Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you, brother. Take care.